In this lesson, I'd like to have a quick look at how we navigate around our sets of data using the keyboard. Now, if you've just got a small set of data, you can just click into your spreadsheet to any particular location on the screen that's on show. But if your data goes thousands of cells down or thousands of cells across, then you have to end up either scrolling like this or moving your slider bar down the bottom right here, left and right, to get across all of your data. So it's much easier to use the keyboard. But before we do, I'm just going to ask you a question. If you've got a piece of paper handy, just jot the answer to this question down, and that is, how many cells down does the spreadsheet go? In other words, how many rows of data? So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 and so on. How far down does that go? Just jot what you think. It's not infinity, it is an actual answer. If you want to have a guess, put something down, you know, I don't know, 50, 100, 1,000 or whatever you think it might be. And when you've jotted that down, here's your second question that I'd like you to jot down. We've got A, B, C, D across the top. So they are referring to your column names. How far does that go? How many columns are there on a spreadsheet going across from the left to the right? Because we're going to have a look in a minute, but it'd be just interesting to know how close you are to the actual answer. Okay, so first of all, we'll have a look at moving around our data, and then we'll go and have a look to see how many cells, and we'll see if you're correct. So if you click into A1, if you're following along, rather than scrolling through our data to get to the bottom, what we can do is hold your control key down and just tap your down arrow on your keyboard, and that takes your active cell right to the bottom of the data. In fact, that's not quite true. What it does, it takes you to the first cell before a blank cell. So if there was a blank cell halfway through your data, it would stop just before that blank cell. But we try to keep to the rule of at least no blank rows, but you just need to be aware of that. Control down in this set of data will take us to the bottom of the data, and then if I did control down again, it will take us to the bottom of the spreadsheet. So let's see how close you were to the correct answer. There's actually 1,048,576 cells. So to get down there, you just hold your control, press your down arrow, and it takes you right to the bottom. So there you go, 1,048,576. If we do the same going up, that's control and up arrow stops at the first piece of data it finds going up, and then control up arrow stops at the last piece of data, and control up again takes us to A1 if there was a space. Okay, now going to the right, we do control and right arrow, and that takes us all the way across to, in this case, E1. If I now take it across right to the end, we'll know exactly how many cells there are. We'll see how close you are to this one. So after Z, I'll just take this along with my arrow key one at a time here. After Z it goes AA, AB, AC and so on. Okay, so let's go across there. So from A1 it's control right arrow and then control right arrow, and you'll see that that takes us to XFD, which is actually 16,384 columns. So a lot of columns there. In fact, if you multiply those two numbers together, 16,384 and 1,048,576, you get a big number. If you counted to that number, in other words, you counted the cells on this one worksheet, it would take you, go on, how long do you reckon? Have a guess. What do you reckon? Half a day, a week, 2 weeks? Okay, I'll give you the answer. It'll take you over 1,000 years to count to that large number. In other words, counting every cell on one worksheet. You don't need to know that, but maybe useful for the pub quiz. Okay, so that's how we get around the spreadsheet with large sets of data. You can use the keyboard as I've done with just your arrow keys, and that moves you, as you can see, one cell at a time, up, down, left or right. But with your control key, it moves you to the last cell before a blank cell. That's the basic rule there. So, but it's a nice quick way to move around. Have a little practice of that, and then we'll move on to the next lesson. In this lesson, I'd like to have a look at selecting ranges of cells. The reason we want to select ranges of cells is that you may need to select it to maybe format the cells, or color the cells, or align the cells, or maybe you want to copy and paste selections of data. But nevertheless, we need to look at ways of highlighting these ranges. So the first way is using your mouse. What you do is click into the top left of where you want to select. So if I want to select from A1, I'm just going to click into A1, and you'll see that I'm holding the mouse cursor right in the center of cell A1, and you've got a plus sign. It's like a white plus sign. At that point, hold your left mouse button down and then move your mouse down, and that will select a range down, and when I let go, that leaves that range selected. Now if I want to select a range going the other way, again I just click into the cell that I want to start from and start moving over to the right. So that's selecting selections going down or going across, but we can select larger selections by clicking into the cell at the top left of where you want to start and move your mouse down and to the right, and that will select your cells. If you want to select a whole column of cells, for example column A, if you pop up to the top there and just hover over the A, you can see a sort of black arrow pointing down, and when you click your mouse button, that selects all the cells for 1,048,576 cells. But if you want to select more than one column, keep your left mouse button down while you're pointing down there, hold it down and drag across to the right, and that starts selecting the columns. So we can do exactly the same with rows. If you come over to the row that you want to select and hover over the number, and you'll see a little black arrow pointing to the right. Hold your left mouse button down and that selects the row, and if you want more than one row, just drag that down like that. That's easy enough when you've got small selections to make, but if I was dragging this down and I wanted to select the data and it went beyond the bottom of the screen, this is where it can take ages if you've got thousands and thousands of records. What we're going to do is use the keyboard. So you click into the first cell that you want, and if you remember, to move to the bottom of the data before we used control and down arrow. This time we're going to use shift, control and down arrow, and that will select all the data down to the first blank cell it finds. So if we have a look here, see it stops just before this blank cell. If I now did a shift, control and right arrow, that goes right across the data to the other end of the data here. Now you can use the shift key on its own and the arrow keys, and that moves you up and down one row or column at a time. You can see how that's moving up and down just by holding the control key down, the shift key down, and then moving left or right. So that can be quite useful when you want a bit more accuracy. So if I was, for example, here in A1, I can hold shift and just come down a little bit and go across to the right. So that's selecting with your keys. It's control shift to go to the end of a range with your arrows, or shift on its own to go one at a time. Or you can hold your left mouse button down and select that way. But if you want to select cells that are not next to each other, what you have to do is select your first range first. So I'll select a small range just here with my mouse. Then if you hold the control key down and then start selecting the other ranges, you can see how I can select as many different ranges that are not next to each other that I like. And all the time that control is held down, I can even select columns or rows. So if I keep control down, I can select column N and drag across to O. I can select row 12 and drag down to say 14, and then make a selection over here. And then you can let go of your mouse and your control once you've got your selections. With Office 365, if I hold control down and go back over certain selections, if I just do that here, when I let go, can you see it's unselected it? Okay, so go off and have a practice of that and just get used to selecting with your mouse or with your control shift key or your shift key and your arrow keys. And see you in the next lesson.